Hello, everyone. Welcome to Microeconomics. The topic for today will be perfect competition. Within this topic, we're going to learn the characteristics of perfect competition, the economic model for perfect competition, and the calculations of profit within perfect competition, and all of the other characteristics along with the section. I'm Professor Bias, and welcome to our online session. Now, within perfect competition, some of the main characteristics of a competitive market is that it consists of a market where all of the industry participants are considered to be price takers. Within perfect competition, it's the ideal market where the participants, such as the seller or the consumer, cannot influence the price, and everyone is a price taker. The producers and consumers have no direct influence on the price level, meaning that the twin forces of supply and demand determine the equilibrium price, or the market price in this case, and all of the transactions that take place between the supplier and the seller and the consumer. So the price here in this case is determined by the twin forces of supply and demand. Producers have no significant market share, and everyone in this case is competing with each other in order to sell their product. And we have the characteristics that the consumer itself regard the products as equivalent or similar or homogeneous. The product itself is relatively standard, equivalent, similar, or in some cases, even identical when we're looking at perfect competition. And within this market, we can see that there is free entry and exit mobility into and out of the market. The number of producers in the industry can adjust to any change in the market conditions. And the number of sellers always adjusts as well. And the consumers can decide where to buy the product at any given time. There's the freedom of choice, the freedom of enterprise, the freedom of consumption, and freedom of purchasing any good or service. And there's no individual firm controlling anybody from buying or a good or service or from selling the product. So there's no barriers to entry. No firm can artificially keep any other firm from entering the industry, or there's a significant market power by one firm. Everybody competes with each other. The firms cannot keep anybody from entering the industry. There could be in and out adjustments in the market, and producers can enter or exit in and out of the industry anytime. In the short term, which consists of the immediate short term, medium term, long run for the year, and so on. If profits continue or profits exist, firms enter. If profits diminish, firms exit. There's always an adjustment process within the market activity under perfect competition. There's free mobility and transparent information. The firms within perfect competition tend to incur profits. Sometimes they break even, sometimes they incur losses. In some cases, they shut down. So the basic formula that we have for perfect competition, or just the basic profit formula, is that any firm that is generating profit is going to take into consideration their total revenue, which is the value of sales, price times quantity, minus their total costs of production. And within this basic formula, we can calculate the total revenue minus costs will give us our profit to the firm. And if total revenue is greater than total cost, the firm is highly profitable. If total revenue is equal to total cost, the firm breaks even, and the firm is neither making a profit nor incurring a loss. But if revenue, TR, total revenue, TR, is less than total cost, the firm incurs a significant loss, or it may incur losses of magnitude. The thing is that most firms ideally would like to break even, or in the best case scenario, make profits all of the time. But sometimes these profits are competitive that any other firm can enter the market. If firms incur losses, they don't necessarily shut down immediately. They may wait for the market to recover or for demand to increase and so on. So the incurring a loss doesn't always mean shut down right away. And then we have our analysis of perfect competition, that the marginal revenue of producing a good or service, in this case, the marginal revenue is the additional revenue generated from selling an additional good or service, or producing one more unit. How much more revenue can we get from selling an additional unit? In perfect competition, there's a very unique feature that for each additional unit sold and produced, the marginal revenue may be the same. because we have a price-taking behavior by the producer. The producer is a price taker. So in this case, the marginal revenue is going to be, in the formula situation, it's equivalent to the change in revenue divided by the change in output. If we increase output, sell more units, there's going to be a change in revenue, more revenue. So marginal revenue, in this case, is the additional revenue by producing one more unit or additional units of goods. So when we're looking at the marginal revenue, it's the change in total revenue generated by additional units of goods and sales versus additional units of goods and services produced. And for a price-taking firm, the marginal revenue, it's always equivalent to the market price. For a price-taking firm, the marginal revenue is always equivalent to the market price because the firm is a price taker. The firm is a price taker, meaning that they have no influence on the price. So every time they change output or increase output, any additional units of output is going to generate more revenue, but it's always going to be equivalent to what the market price is at that time. Again, they cannot set the price. They're not price setters. They take the price as given. So their marginal revenue for each unit is going to be always equivalent to the price. Just think about the fast food industry. If you go to a McDonald's, if you open a McDonald's franchise, they know that when they sell their mac and cheese, it's always going to be $5.99. It's price-taking behavior. That's their marginal revenue per unit. That's their market price per unit. So that's why in this case, they're always the same. They're equivalent to each other. So marginal revenue is equal to the change in revenue divided by the change in quantity. So here we have the scenario of producing tomatoes and for a particular small farm, a farmer that produces tomatoes. So we can produce 0 units, 1 unit, or 4 units, or 7 units. And the total revenue in here is if you sell 1 unit, you get $18. 2 units, you get $36. 3 units, total of $54. 4 units, total of $72. 5 units, total of $90. And then total cost is the total cost of transactions. You take the difference in total revenue minus total cost, you get your profit, total revenue minus total cost. Notice how in the first few units, total profit is relatively small, negative in some cases. If your revenue is less than total cost, you have no profit. Here we have revenue for 2 units, that's equal to total cost, so your profit is 0. And as we produce more units, your total revenue rises, but your total cost also increases. So you take the difference between total revenue minus total cost for the 5th unit, and you'll see that your total profit here is $18. If we look at the change in total revenue, which is marginal revenue by definition is the change in total revenue generated by producing an additional unit. If I produce 1 more unit, revenue increases, additional revenue. By an additional unit to 2, revenue increases by an additional amount. Consider by how much it's changing. It's changing from 0 to 18, 18 to 36 is an increase or changes by 18, 56 to 54 changes by 18, 54 to 72 changes by 18, 72 to 90, revenue changes by 18. If you notice, revenue is always changing by the same amount, it's increasing, but it has to do because they're always selling that additional unit at the same price. So your profit margins will be your difference between your total revenue minus total cost. Here it happens to be that the profit is equivalent to 18 as well. So what is the profit maximizing conditions for a price optimizing making firm? In perfect competition, we have an optimal output rule. And the optimal output rule consists that a firm has a profit maximizing rule condition. Profit is maximized by producing the quantity of output where the marginal revenue, MR, the marginal revenue for each additional unit produced, the marginal revenue has to be either greater or equal to the marginal cost, the cost of additional units, marginal cost per unit. So this profit maximizing rules specifies that revenue is going to increase until the additional revenue per unit is going to be equivalent to the cost of producing that additional unit. So we have our simple identity. This identity here is marginal costs here is equal to marginal revenue. Where marginal cost is equivalent to marginal revenue or vice versa, we produce a quantity of output where this condition is met. Why? Because every additional unit, again, marginal revenue is the change in total revenue for each additional unit produced. Marginal cost is the change in total cost for each additional unit produced. This one talks about cost. So we want to make sure that our costs are at least equivalent to marginal revenue, or that marginal revenue is greater than cost in order to produce an optimal quantity where this condition is fulfilled. For a perfect competitor firm that is in a perfect competition market, the profit maximizing output rule is very similar and very standard. And if we look at the situation, profit is maximized by producing the quantity of output where the marginal cost of the last unit produced is equivalent to the market price. And if you recall, in perfect competition, the market price is equivalent to the marginal revenue per unit because the price is given. The firms are price takers. They have no way to influence the price. So every unit they sell, every additional unit sold is always going to be sold at the market price. Therefore, the additional revenue generated is always going to be equivalent to the price. So we have a triple identity. Since price in perfect competition is standard, and we have the identity from the previous slide that produce an optimal quantity of output where marginal cost is equivalent to marginal revenue. In perfect competition, produce a level of output where the marginal cost of the last unit is equal to the market price. And we have two identities. We can substitute the price here to the marginal revenue, or just note that the price in the market in perfect competition is equal to marginal revenue. So we have a triple identity. In perfect competition is the only time that this condition is fulfilled, meaning that the marginal cost of production is equivalent to the marginal cost of the last unit produced is equivalent to the market price of the unit, which is equivalent to the marginal revenue of the unit produced in the last unit produced, in this case in perfect competition. We're going to be using mainly this identity. Marginal cost is equivalent to marginal revenue, because this is just for implication that the market price is equal to marginal revenue in perfect competition. For simplicity, I'm going to be using this one mainly. Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost equivalent to marginal revenue. So here we have our first economic model for perfect competition. Suppose we have the current price of tomatoes at $18. That is the market price for bushels of tomatoes. We can produce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tomatoes. And the market price here is $18. Notice how it's the same. It's $18 regardless if we have 2 bushels, regardless if it's 4 bushels, regardless if it's 6 or 7. The market price is given here. And so each additional unit produced, marginal revenue is 18. For 1 unit, marginal revenue is 2. It's 18 for 2 units. If you produce 3 units, it's still 18. In other words, the market price is always the same, $18, regardless of how many you produce. And we need to consider the marginal cost of production. We need to consider the average total cost of production. To produce tomatoes, there is an average cost of producing goods and services. So we need to consider those two. For simplicity, assume that they're given. The marginal cost of producing tomatoes, in this case, is illustrated by the marginal cost curve, MC, which is this red curve. And it intersects the marginal revenue, blue curve, at point E. From our standard optimal formula of production, where marginal cost is equivalent to marginal revenue, which is equal to the price, at point E, you produce an optimal quantity. What quantity is going to be produced? 5 units of tomatoes. 5 tomatoes are going to be produced. At this particular point, the marginal revenue is greater, or equal to marginal cost, and you can produce 5 units. So at the market price of 18, the firm considers an optimal point of production, point E, to produce an optimal quantity, or in this case is a profit maximizing quantity of 5 units of tomatoes that are produced by this competitive farmer in the tomato industry. Now, we're going to be adding the cost of production on average as well. And for the most, we're going to be using this particular model to go for. We're going to have the profit maximizing model. Some of you are asking, well, how much profits does this small farmer make? Does it make a profit? Does it incur loss? Or break even, etc. We're going to follow those conditions. And for those particular categories, we're going to use the following formula. Profit for a profit maximizing perfectly competitive firm is determined by the market price, which is given by the twin forces of supply and demand in a competitive market, minus the average cost of production, average total cost, times the quantity of output produced. This is on the x-axis. However, what is the quantity of output produced? Quantity on the x-axis that we produced. The profit is equivalent to the market price minus the average cost of production of the quantity that we produce on the x-axis on the model. And if the market price is greater than the average total cost of production, then the firm is highly profitable. If the market price is equivalent to the average total cost, the firm breaks even. And if the market price is less than or equal to the average total cost, the firm incurs a loss. In some cases, when the price really drops below a certain point, the firm shuts down. So the market price is essentially what determines if the firm would generate a profit, break even, or incur a significant loss in our competitive structure. The market price essentially determines all three conditions of the firm. So going back to our tomato model, our price of tomatoes is $14, $18. That's our market price. That's our marginal revenue per unit for each additional unit sold, and it's going to be at $18. That's our market price. We can produce 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tomatoes. And we have our marginal, our average total cost curve, which in this case is the cost of production on average for those units produced for tomatoes 1, 2, 3, 4. On average, they're going to cost an X amount of dollars. So that's why we have price and cost on the vertical axis. And we have our marginal cost curve, which is the orange curve. This will be our first perfectly competitive firm model. And it's going to be a profitable model. If the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost here, the firm makes a profit. Recall that most businesses are in the interest of making profits. So it's not going to be in here in the first intersection because we first of all you have low output, and then here you have cost, which is greater than revenue. So you're going to always look where marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost, which happens at all of the points, at all points. This one may intersect here. So it's going to be right here. You can produce at point E is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Point E is not point C, point E. At point E, you produce 5 units. The optimal quantity is 5 units. What does point C mean? Point C is going to be always an important reference point because point C is where the marginal cost curve, orange curve, intersects average total costs at its lowest level, point C. That means that at that point, you, on average, have the lowest cost of production for 4 units. But we're looking to maximize profit. So produce more output where marginal revenue is equal to marginal costs at point E. Right where this intersects, depending on where they intersect, produce 5 units. 5 units were produced. So then we look for a formula. Our profit formula is the price minus the average total cost times the quantity produced. There's going to be this vertical distance. The vertical distance between point E and the average total cost, which is this blue curve, price minus average total cost. That's going to give us our formula for profit. Our profit is the distance between point E, which is $18. $18 is the market price at point E. The intersection occurs, marginal revenue and marginal cost intersect are equal to each other. We produce 5 units. 5 units are going to be sold to the consumer at $18. And how much does this 5 units cost to produce? Well, at point D is indicating that on average, the cost of production of 5 units is going to be $14.40. That's the cost of production on the purple curve. On the purple curve, the cost of production is $14.40. And you produce 5 of them to be sold to the consumer at $18. The difference between the market price by the blue rectangle It's the firm's profit. So how do we calculate the profit? Well, profit, we look at our formula here in the top corner. Profit is equal to the price, which is $18, minus the vertical distance between price minus costs on the average total cost curve, which is $3. It's $14.40. That's at $14.40 right here. So that's a profit per unit of $3.60. 18 minus 14.40 is $3.60. How many units we produce? 5 units. So what's our profit? $3.60 times 5. The firm is making $18 in profit for this profit maximizing perfectly competitive firm. Now, what if the price actually lowers and it drops? And what can lead to a low price? What if the price, instead of being at 18, it's at $10? Marginal revenue, it's $10 per unit, and the market price is $10. But certain situations can lead to low market prices, low consumer demand, lack of, in this case, the product may not be needed as much or lowers the price. Essentially, in this case, is the twin forces of supply and demand have taken into effect. So you have a low demand that has lowered the price in the market, or simply low prices or more competitors driving the price down. So if the average total cost of production is greater than the market price or greater than the marginal revenue per unit, again, this is revenue per unit. Additional revenue per unit is at $10, but if you look at your average cost curve, it's already greater in terms of the price and cost on the vertical axis is greater than your marginal revenue per unit or the market price. You should already kind of have an idea that this may not be good for the firm and be a loss. However, sometimes the firms still decide to produce even if they incur a loss. So we still produce, but the question is what quantity? Well, we're going to produce where marginal revenue and marginal costs intersect, which happen here at point A. That's the first point of intersection besides this one. This one in this case. You always increase production because your cost is declining and then it rises here. But you produce at point A. Point A is where marginal revenue and marginal costs, the identity, is fulfilled. How many units you produce? 3. And what are these 3 units going to be sold to at the market revenue price? $10. That's the best we can do, $10. We would like to charge more, but that's the current price. And how much are these 3 units going to cost you? Well, if you look at the average total cost curve, the average cost is higher. So if your cost is greater than your market price, you may have a loss. So the cost of production of these 3 units are going to be on point Y because the average total cost curve, the purple curve, indicates the cost of production. The cost of production of 3 units are $14.67. And you can only sell them at $10. You're going to incur a loss, which is the area of this rectangle. $14.67 minus 10, that's $4.67 per unit loss. So we need to calculate the firm's profit or loss margin. The total loss is not going to be profit because it's going to be in the negative red. So here we have profit instead of being profit, it's going to be a loss. So you have your price, which is $10, your market price here, $10, minus your average cost of production, which is, right here. Average total cost on the average total cost curve, it's $14.67. And the quantity produced on the x-axis, quantity produced, is 3 units. You have a loss of negative $14. This is indicating the loss. For clarity, you will be given the axis, vertical axis, you will be given the quantities. You just need to, for the most part, calculate and identify the areas of profit and the areas of loss. Make the calculations to indicate the value of the loss and what these points mean. Point C is always the minimum point on the average total cost curve for the minimum cost output. 4 units is the one that minimizes cost. Now, why is that important? Because point C is on the third model. At a price of $14, the marginal revenue per unit is equivalent to the market price. And if you notice, it's tangent to the average total cost curve at point C. The marginal cost curve intersects at point C What that means here is that at point C, all of the curves at this point touch one another. And if your costs on average is equivalent to your marginal revenue and your market price and your marginal cost, then the firm is breaking even at your minimum cost point level. Your minimum average total cost point indicates here that you can produce 4 units, minimize your costs, and at the same time, you can charge a market price that is equivalent to your average total cost and break even. This is referred to as a break even. Notice how there's no profits to be made up top and there's no losses to be obtained down below. This is the break even point for the firm. At point C, the market price of 14, you produce 4 units of output for tomatoes. The firm doesn't make a profit and doesn't incur a loss. This is the break-even model. Basically, just the graphs intersecting all of them at point C. What companies have recently become obsolete and filed for bankruptcy, incurred significant losses? Radio Shack did so last year. There was a time where we used to buy a lot of our electronic devices in traditional retail centers and stores. Due to their high cost of operation on average, high wages, transportation fees, and so on, they lower in terms of the availability to a consumer, and they shut down. In terms of the costs are high, consumers are buying in different places online, and they shut down. What other company faced this scenario? Sporting Goods. Sporting Goods, another company that most of us might have been familiar with and purchase your academic stuff there. Not your academic, your sporting gear and a lot of sports stuff. And it also went out of business. They incurred significant losses and later shut down for business. We're going to talk about the shutdown point. When does the business have to shut down? After incurring consistent losses, not all the time. So we have the case of resource allocated efficiency. If you allocate your resources efficiently, then you produce a quantity of output at where your price in the market is equal to your marginal cost. Because at that point, you may not incur a loss and not incur a profit. So you're allocating your resource efficiently, at least to break even. Productive efficiency is a situation in which a firm produces an output at the lowest average total cost possible. Now, it really depends as to where the firm wants to produce, because sometimes producing at the lowest average total cost doesn't not necessarily guarantee profits. Sometimes it does, but you're producing you're doing, in this case, an efficient mechanism to lower your cost on average. Most firms are profit-driven firms and may increase production to a point where they can at least make some profits or sometimes break even. Now, let's assume our average total cost curve ATC and the average variable cost ABC are the following conditions. This is very important because the cost of production on average and the variable cost and the twin force of supply and demand along with the price in the market help derive the short run individual supply curve for a firm. And it's actually coming from the marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve, which in this case is indicated by the yellow-orange curve, it indicates that it's going to intersect the average variable cost curve at the lowest point here, point M, and the average total cost at its lowest point here, point C, which was the other point that we have been analyzing. These points are important because they help illustrate our supply curve, meaning that firms are not going to start supplying any good or service at a low price or low cost. They start supplying it at least at a point where they can cover some goods and services cost of production on average. The supply of goods does not start at zero. They have a cost of operation. That's why this is important when we look at the average cost curves and the marginal cost curve. They indicate and help derive the individual supply curve. To supply goods and services, it requires a cost, and that cost starts here on the average variable cost point. On the average variable cost point, to produce 3 units, on average, the variable cost will be approximately 10. And if the firm cannot cover its average variable cost of operation, it will shut down. If it can cover them, it will stay in business. It may incur losses. And if it can make more, it could break even if it's operating at point, right on the point on the average total cost curve, and so on. So let's look at how these points look. We have point A, which indicates the average variable cost curve, lowest point. That's the average variable cost. These are all the things that are changing the variable cost of operations. I often like to refer this to like Ranging Waters, for example, although it is not a competitive firm. But this is a great example if you can relate this information. There's a lot of variable costs that undergo in terms of running a business that change all the time, like the water filtration system, the lifeguards, the principle is the same, the wages of the employees, and so on. If on average, the price in the market is less than $10, the output of the service is zero. If the firm can cover at least the average variable cost of production, it may choose to stay in business or shut down. So this is the starting point of operation. So this is where the supply curve actually starts, which is right here. Point A is the start of the supply curve, which is the marginal cost per each additional unit produced, increases the supply of the quantity produced. And if the firm receives a price of $12, the quantity produced increases to 3.5, and at this point, the firm, if you notice, this market price is less than the average total cost, is incurring a loss, but at least it covers the average variable cost, so it stays in business at a loss in the short term. At point C, the firm breaks even and produces a minimum cost output. And ideally, if the price increases to 18, the market price increases to 18, quantity supply increases to 5 units, and the firm makes a profit. Point A, B, C, and E, this red curve, indicate the supply of goods and services. So it's like even this one. This vertical, horizontal, and upward sloping curve, which is part of the MC curve, indicate the supply of goods and services, which is important in relation to the competitive firm. It's the short run individual supply curve for a competitive market. If the firm cannot cover the variable cost of operations, it shuts down. It's the minimum cost that a firm can cover on average. The firms don't operate at a zero cost. It's very unlikely. Within this section, we're going to also see how sometimes if there's other firms that enter the market, the supply of goods increases and the prices is lower, and so on. But for now, we're going to conclude when it comes to the individual supply curve derived from the cost structure of a competitive market. Thank you, everyone, and I enjoyed the session. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.